Everyone, welcome at Wavect. Today with Roy Bashin, also known as Zeneca, who is the founder of ZenAcademy and the 333 Club, and is also Chief Zen Officer at Blur.io. Please feel free to explain to me what that actually is. I would love to know. And also advises a ton of other projects. And today we're going to talk about how NFTs actually will change the way we engage with customers and fans. And it's a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for being here. And I would say feel free to add some thoughts on this. Introduce yourself. What are you passionate about? What are you doing? How does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I can talk all day about NFTs all the time, but I'll give a little bit of background on me. So I got into this space in early 2021, February, March, which at the time I thought I was late. I was like, oh, I missed it. Crypto punks are worth tens of thousands of dollars. And in hindsight, clearly it was relatively early. So even now it's relatively early. But prior to that, I was a professional poker player as my only job. So I had like 15 years doing that, and then saw crypto, saw NFTs as this new thing that I really wanted to like sink my teeth into and understand, because it seemed, at first it seemed like a scam. It seemed, these JPEGs, these images for thousands of dollars. But once I did some research and started to understand the tech, I was like, hey, there's something really cool here, something powerful, something revolutionary. And yeah, for the last 18 months, I've just been like falling deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, I think, like a lot of us do.
Awesome. And how did you actually get to know it? Is that something which just you read on the news or?
Yeah, no. So I had a friend who is I knew through poker. I've known him for 15 years, like 18 now, I guess. And yeah, and he just like he asked me one day, do you know what hash masks are, which was an NFT project early last year? And I said, I have no idea. And then that was like the end of that. And like 2 or 3 days later, he's like, so I looked into it, hash masks. I like this NFT thing, because he had some friends that were talking to him about it and he himself didn't know. And so like that was my introduction. And then he read an article and was like, hey, I understand it now. I think that there's something to it. And then sent me the article, and I read it and I was like, oh, okay. And so like we started chatting back and forth, and so started learning together. And then it was just a lot of like self-learning and Googling and YouTube and Twitter and everything like normal people do to learn these days.
Awesome. So in general, I think what makes the space actually is that kind of spirit, right? I think we all know it. It's a super positive space, except in bear markets, probably, where you don't even allow to say GM anymore, as far as I know, at least. But how do you actually think, from a project perspective, what makes actually NFTs so special, and how can projects utilize that on how to provide as much as value to their community as possible, on how they actually engage with them?
Yeah, we've had online communities, digital communities for decades. The early days of the internet, there were chat rooms, AOL Instant Messenger, IRC, all sorts of early stuff, MSN Messenger. And then, forums became a big thing. Facebook groups became a big thing. And, MySpace and, all sorts of stuff. I think NFTs are just sort of a new evolution of this, or one use case of NFTs includes a new evolution of this, where you form these online communities where people band together around a common interest or idea. A lot of it we've seen is like PFP projects and stuff like that, which I think for the majority are probably going to be short-lived, but it's almost like a proof of concept, and some of them will certainly stick around. And I think it allows the creators of NFTs, whether it's someone trying to create a PFP project, a community, a brand, whether it's a musician trying to connect more closely with their fans, or an artist with their collectors, or a game designer, a game studio with the players. And it sort of, I think, strengthens and tightens that relationship between customer, collector, consumer, fan, and creator in a way that hasn't really been possible, isn't really possible without the technology, because it's this provenance piece, right? With NFTs and anything blockchain related, you can prove ownership of a digital asset. You can prove on the blockchain, hey, I attended this event. I bought this at this time. I own this. And that allows the creators, the companies, the whoever, the artists, to then engage with fans in new and interesting ways. It could be, oh, so I mean, and most of it I don't think we've seen yet, but it could be, oh, if you're a musician and people who attend your concerts, and you can track, all right, so and so, like there's these many people who have attended 20 concerts over the course of a couple of years. Maybe you do a special private show just for those people, some exclusive thing. Maybe, you know, and we're seeing with artists now, artists who create digital art or even physical art, can airdrop new pieces to their collectors and reward them for collecting. And, you know, there's value to that. There's fun to that. There's engagement. And there's, you know, infinite possible use cases. I don't think we've seen really much yet. We've barely scratched the surface, but it's just really interesting, the things that become possible with this new technology.
It's really crazy. It's also, as you just said, beyond that, actually, on how you basically can utilize NFTs in a creative way, right? Between companies and users, or celebrities and fans, or whatever. But there are also, as you just said, a ton of use cases which are also not related to actually that specific case, but from tokenization of real world assets to actually on-chain ownership of certain things like liquidity pools or whatever, right? There are a ton of use cases for that. And basically, when we talk about these creative NFTs, what everyone basically talks about, there is always that, I would say, in normal market phases at least, but even now, there's a lot of positivity within good communities, right? I would call it Web3 spirit right now. But do you actually think, with more people actually moving into that space, is that something that's going to stay, or is that just because we're all early, we're all having that mindset that we are gonna change something? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think it'll change, just like any sort of industry or area or space sphere, where when you're early and when the community size is small, it's like tight, it's close knit. You know, most people know most people, or like you're just one or two rings separated, and it's like this. We'll look back on, I think, on these days in a decade or two and be like nostalgic about it. Just like I'm sure people look back on the days of the early internet and are nostalgic about that, or anything that really blows up. Yeah, it's just it's not possible that it will remain. The spirit will not. Well, the spirit and the ethos might like run through for those core communities, and like we can lay that for future generations to sort of inherit. But like a lot of what it looks like will be different, and it'll just I believe basically mirror society eventually. It's kind of like social media, where eventually it's just a mirror of society, because there's so many, like there's billions of people now using social media. You have everything. You have people who are extremists and fanatics, and then extreme niches, and people who are like obsessed with, you know, ancient, or like what's the word, like old school typewriters, or like knitting needles, or like really like niches that there's, but that they're able to find people all around the world who have that same interest and be like, oh, I like antique typewriters. Oh, you like antique typewriters. Let's create this small community and chat about it. That will happen, and then you'll have like crazy people, and like there'll be like left wing, right wing, and everything in the middle, and that will always like enter the game. Like I think for the most part, NFTs, Web3, crypto is like decently isolated from politics at the moment, at least when you're within the space. When you're sort of outside the space talking to people about it, there's some of that. But I think, you know, give it a decade, and for better or worse, it'll just become part of our lives. And then the culture and the ethos and everything will change. And again, we'll look back on these days and be like, it was nice when we were just, playing JPEGs and all that kind of cartoon animals. But it's inevitable and necessary to grow and change.
Yeah, definitely. So in general, do you think, based on that degen play, basically where you grab some nice NFTs during the mint or whatsoever, is that something that's going to be something professional in 5 to 10 years? Right now it's something where a lot of people make a living out of, right? But do you actually think that's something sustainable? Or just to let you know why I'm thinking that way, or why I'm asking this, is right now we have still a lot of projects, right? 99% will fail and will vanish probably. But there's much more to come and much more projects to stay as well, as the quality of these kind of projects increase, and also more fundamental projects enter the space, such as huge brands from Salesforce, Samsung, whatsoever, right? So with that increasing supply of NFTs that have some fundamental value, and probably because of that decreasing the average floor price because of that increased supply, and also because maybe crypto markets are less volatile as well, could that still be something that is like on that scale, like right now, where people make a living out of it? Or is that also something that might decrease?
I think there will always be some people able to make a living out of it, but I think it'll get tougher and tougher. The markets are wildly inefficient right now, and I don't think they'll ever be perfectly efficient. But I do think that they will get to a point where it's tougher to sort of flip and just mint random things and make a profit, and it will be more akin to, like say, take the stock market as an example. Like 95% of people can't successfully outperform the market, but there's always going to be a small percentage of people who can, evaluate companies, evaluate projects, evaluate startups, invest in invest in startups. VCs do a lot of it. It'll probably be similar to NFT projects. And I mean, that's, yeah. Also, I sort of look at like the collectibles in like the real world prior to NFTs, and there's people flipping sneakers, there's people flipping making money off Pokemon cards, basketball cards, there's people making money off luxury handbags. There's people who will, they're limited edition releases and they'll go and buy them and then resell them online, and watches, and there's always going to be a market for people who are able to navigate those niches and those edge cases. But I think the days of the last 5 years in crypto, where there's like degen mints and random stuff, and with the market so small, Elon tweets and Doge goes up 20%, or at least maybe it doesn't anymore, but it used to. Similar with NFTs, like one influencer who has 50,000, 100,000 followers can tweet and affect the floor price, and like when the market's that fickle and immature and inefficient and flimsy, there's always going to be capacity to make money. Obviously, there's a lot of immoral and ethical shady stuff that goes on as well. And I think that, give it a few years, and that will, maybe it takes 10 years, maybe it takes 2, I don't know, probably closer to 10, for the markets to mature, and it'll be more difficult. But I think it's necessary and it's healthy. And as the market grows in size and in volume and money and everything, and market cap, we will reach a point where it's harder and harder. But there will always be opportunities, I think, for like the top few percent.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. An economist told me a couple of weeks or months ago that the moment where we actually have some broad indices around the market itself is the moment where we actually got that maturity, where the volatility will drastically decrease and actually really drive that mass adoption everyone is talking about, right? Speaking of that, we just talked around a lot of about the market itself, where it might go and so on. But I think what's also crucial actually would be on how brands could utilize NFTs right now, right? That's basically what all major brands right now try to do, at least either on the Metaverse side or utilizing NFTs itself in some kind of sense. And I would be interested if you have some maybe more specific examples which you personally think, oh wow, that's actually quite cool what they did. And that's something other projects or even brands could utilize as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting watching various brands sort of enter the NFT space, the metaverse. We've seen like so many brands dip their toes in. Pepsi, Adidas, Nike acquired Artifact. There's a lot. Gucci. That really there's a countless number now. I think that for the most part, and for the majority, and even including most of the ones I just mentioned, it's too early to really expect or to think you can have like a massive presence and really engage your existing fans and clients and customer base in a meaningful way. The space is just too new, too small. Most people don't know what MetaMask is, or what a wallet is, or what OpenSea is, or how to interact with any of it. Most people don't even understand Ethereum, or Bitcoin for that matter. So I think that probably the quote unquote right approach or the smart approach, and this is one I think that a lot of these brands are taking, is to begin to think about what their metaverse strategy should be and their Web3 strategy should be now. Because, you know, especially for some of the massive brands, it might take 12 months, it might take 2-3 years to really build to scale something that can, you know, if you're Coca-Cola, for instance, and you have like, you know, millions, billions of people interested in your product, it takes, you know, years to really get something to market that is on brand and is legal in different jurisdictions and makes sense from a commercial perspective. So I think that what they're doing, what I'm seeing, is a lot of these brands are like, they're setting that infrastructure up internally, and some of them are like dipping their toes in, where they're like, all right, we're gonna like airdrop for free some NFTs. We're gonna just test it out and see what it's like. And I think that's cool. I think the mistake is like, if a company is thinking short-sighted and they're trying to raise a large amount of capital, if they're an existing company, and use that as, it's like cash grab is like the term that gets thrown around a lot. I think for the biggest companies, for the most part, they're not doing that. Many of them say, hey, we're going to do a launch, but we're going to donate the money to charity, or it's going to be a free mint and stuff like that. But I just generally think for brands entering the space, it's really too early to have a meaningful impact. And this is the time, and this also goes to individuals as well, this is the time to be learning, understanding how it works, watching as the space matures. Like, the infrastructure needs to get better, the tooling needs to get better, the education needs to get better, and just prepare yourself so that you can deploy in a meaningful way, in a way that makes sense and is value additive, not just to the company, but to the end users and customers, clients, whoever it might be, as well. And I think that's definitely possible. Like, there are really cool win-win-win situations. It's about taking the time to find them and execute on them.
Awesome. Yeah, we're still super early, I would say, as long as people actually need to understand blockchain, right? As you just said, as long as we need to, for sure, it would be always good to understand wallets and that you don't give away your private key. That's always good to know. But as long as you basically need to care on which blockchain you are on, that's definitely probably a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of that, what kind of business sectors do you expect to really, really benefit from that NFT?
All of them. I think eventually almost every business and industry will get disrupted by NFTs, probably, but definitely I think blockchain technology. And that's not to say that right now it makes sense for most of them too. I think it's a mistake to sort of try and fit everything into an NFT box or a blockchain box. And I think a lot of people are going around with a hammer looking for nails, trying to just like think everything was gonna. But I think, you know, give it 10 years, 20 years maybe. I think every industry will just be using NFTs, using blockchain technology, where it's basically, we're moving into the digital age. We have been over the last few decades. That's not going to slow down. We have augmented reality, we have virtual reality, we have artificial intelligence, we have all these technologies that are going to make life better for the most part and more efficient. Obviously, there's drawbacks, and it's not going to be better across the board. The whole job industry around the world is going to be disrupted as automation increases. But I think that it's kind of inevitable that as the world moves into a more digital and automated future, more of that's going to run on blockchain technology and utilize NFTs. And whether it's the automotive industry, you know, cars will have digital ownership prescribed to them, or real estate. Healthcare is another industry that will probably eventually, like, that's one that's very tricky, and you obviously need to do in a really safe, secure way. But I think all of the issues are solvable, and eventually, yeah, there can be ways figured out where like privacy is ensured and secured and all that kind of stuff, and probably make it even more secure than the status quo. Yeah, music, gaming, art, like these are the obvious ones where we can already start to see use cases. Education, like your degree, instead of it being a piece of paper that, like currently, if you get a degree in Australia where I grew up, and then you want to go work in Germany where I'm right now, you probably have to get it translated, and then you have to get it stamped and approved. And I think with blockchain technology, if you can prove ownership, hey, I got this accreditation, it's tied to my person, and then it's just automatically verifiable by institutions all around the world. Like, that's one basic example. Again, like logistically, we're a long way off, and we need to figure out a lot of small pain points. But I really believe basically every industry is going to be disrupted or improved rather by NFTs and blockchain technology eventually. And that's, yeah, it's going to take a lot of trial and error and probably decades, but yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Definitely a great word. Yeah, use case first, basically, right? Decide what you want to achieve, what value you want to bring into the world, and then choose the tech stack, what kind of technology you need or want to use.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people do the reverse. They're like, oh, I want to launch an NFT project. What can I make an NFT? Instead of I want to make something. Are NFTs the right thing for it? Or is it better to use NFTs rather than traditional means? And I would say that 95% of the time, things that exist now don't need to be NFTs. But it's good that people are still doing it just to experiment, to try, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I'll use ZenAcademy as an example. We have this education platform, and we sold NFTs as membership tokens to join, to get access to courses, to get access to the Discord. You know, we could have done Patreon, we could have done some Web2 subscription model. It definitely would have been easier. It probably would have been more lucrative to have people paying on a monthly basis rather than a once-off lifetime thing. But I am just such a obviously believer in NFTs and invest in the space. It made sense for me to try it, experiment with it, see how it works, and learn from it, so that both myself and hopefully other people in the future can learn from some of the trial and error and things that we try. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And wouldn't be too authentic, I think, as well, if you
exactly. If I just put out a Patreon and
yeah, definitely. Awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of interesting things already have been said. Do you have probably 3 key takeaways for projects maybe listening to this podcast, where you say, if you do these kind of 3 things, you have a better probability to achieve some kind of success?
Yes. So the first thing I think everyone should do, again, project founder or individual, we're in the space or just a human, is like really understanding your why. Like understand why are you doing a certain thing. If you're trying to launch an NFT project, and this is a step that a lot of people skip or just gloss over or think is like a given. Really understand why are you releasing, say, NFTs? What are you hoping to achieve through it? And this goes for someone trying to launch a massive project, an existing brand entering the space, or let's say an individual artist trying to sell art as NFTs. What is the goal? Are they trying to raise money? Are they trying to make money from it? Are they trying to have a closer, and there's not, it doesn't have to be one or the other, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have multiple reasons, but are you trying to have a closer relationship with your collectors? Are you trying to, are you just trying to experiment and learn? And I think that if you can understand your why, it makes it a lot easier to move forward and to have people trust you as well, and to have a plan. Another thing I would say is to stay agile. Like again, like this is something that I'm pretty against the whole idea of roadmaps, even though most projects they have a roadmap. Especially last year, we saw all the time these cookie cutter copy paste roadmaps that was, all right, we're going to, after we mint out in 1 month, we're going to do this. We're going to launch merch. In 3 months, it's going to be a comic. In 6 months, a video game. In 12 months, in real life, whatever it is. And, or an airdrop or a token. And then there's so many different things, and people would put these things down, but our space is evolving and moving and changing so rapidly and so quickly. And the market is changing. I think that being more flexible in, you know, what you can do and what you tell people you will do allows you to like watch the market, watch the space, and evolve with it, rather than like be shoehorned and forced into doing something, you know, rightfully so. If you said something that, and people bought an NFT expecting like a comic book in 6 months, and then you realize, oh, hey, the market, there's saturated, there's too many comics, we have a better idea. It's very difficult to pivot when you've pre-prescribed that. So I think just being open-ended about your intentions, being honest and transparent, but like both internally and externally, having that flexibility to sort of pivot and move, adjust with the market is really, really important. And I guess the last thing, I think, well, I mean, not the last thing, but a third thing that I found really useful for, I have two more actually. The third is listening to people, listening to your audience, listening to your customers, your users, your clients, whoever it is, and just like getting feedback, soliciting feedback, trying to think about what they want and how you can help them and improve their lives. Save people time is always a good thing to shoot for. Provide value, because a lot of the times you might think you have a great idea, and you put it out to the world, but it turns out that's not something you're solving a problem that no one had, or you're offering something that no one asked for, and you could execute excellently on it. It could be amazing and brilliant, and you have a good reason for doing it. But if no one's interested, if there's no benefit to the world or the space, then it's probably going to fall flat and be a waste of time, which is really sad if you've dedicated a lot of your time and effort to it. So yeah, just really listening to your audience. And then the last thing is, it's slightly counterintuitive to that, but it's like staying true to yourself. And so, and I would say that it's easy to get caught up, especially in this space, by what other projects are doing and want to copy them. Like if another project is really successful right now this week, it's easy to say, hey, that's awesome, maybe we should do that for our project. And then if you start doing that too much, you end up like losing yourself and your vision, and it's very difficult for people to trust you. A good example was, I think like September last year, we saw a lot of projects came out with these like ERC20 token drops, where they said, hey, we'll launch an NFT project, you can stake your NFT, you'll get a token, and then there's a liquidity pool created, and people trade it. And, you know, basically all of those tokens went to zero, and the entire project's tanked with it. But the whole market was crazy about it for a while. And so I saw so many projects, like they had no plans ever to release a token. And then they, all of a sudden, everyone around them is doing it. And their members, their holders were asking for it. So this is where sometimes you have to not listen to them. But, and then they said, okay, you know what, we're going to release one. And then everything fell apart because of that. So I think it's a fine balance between listening to your holders and your clients, but also staying true to yourself. Anyway, yeah, that's a few.
Awesome. It reminds me a little bit of actually regular Web2 startups, right? You also have to validate early, like talk with your customers, in that case, your community, right? Know what they want, but also don't just exactly always build blindly what they want. And it's the exactly same. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And yeah, I think four or even
Yeah,
five.
there's four, I think. Yeah.
Key takeaways were an amazing ending. Thanks, Roy, for being here. It was really a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, I hope the audience, everyone watching this, got a lot of value out of it. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it. Thank you.